Maya Johnson pulled her Honda Civic into the driveway of 1247 Maple Street, the same driveway she had been using for 3 years. The modest two-story house with white shutters and a small front garden had been her sanctuary, her first real home after years of apartment living. She worked double shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, saving every penny to make the mortgage payments on time. As she stepped out of her car, still wearing her scrubs after a grueling 12-hour shift, she noticed a woman marching across the street toward her. The woman was tall, blonde, and wore a perfectly pressed tracksuit despite it being nearly 9 in the evening. Her name was Linda Patterson, and she had appointed herself as the unofficial enforcer of the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. Linda had been watching Maya's house for weeks, making mental notes about everything she considered wrong. The small garden gnome by the front door, the fact that Maya sometimes parked slightly crooked when she came home exhausted, and most of all, the reality that Maya didn't look like the other residents in this predominantly white neighborhood. "Excuse me," Linda called out, her voice sharp and commanding. Maya turned around, surprised by the aggressive tone. She had seen this woman before at community meetings but had never spoken to her directly. "Yes?" Maya responded politely despite her exhaustion. Linda stopped just a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "I'm Linda Patterson, HOA Compliance Officer. I need to talk to you about several violations I've documented at this property." Maya felt her heart sink. She had been so careful to follow all the rules, reading through the thick HOA handbook multiple times to make sure she was in compliance. "What violations? I haven't received any notices." "Well, you're receiving one now," Linda snapped, pulling out a small notebook from her tracksuit pocket. "First, your garden gnome violates Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines regarding decorative items. Second, you've parked improperly on at least 6 occasions that I've documented. Third, your mailbox needs repainting. And fourth, you've been hanging laundry on your back porch, which is strictly prohibited." Maya stared at her in disbelief. The garden gnome was barely 6 inches tall and had been a housewarming gift from her grandmother. She had checked the guidelines about decorative items and found nothing prohibiting small garden decorations. As for parking, she always stayed within her own driveway lines, though sometimes she was too tired to park perfectly straight. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Maya said calmly, though inside she felt her blood pressure rising. "I've read the HOA guidelines carefully, and I don't believe any of these things are actual violations." Linda's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you questioning my authority? I've been enforcing HOA rules in this neighborhood for 8 years. I know every single guideline by heart." Maya took a deep breath, trying to remain professional. Her years as a nurse had taught her how to deal with difficult people, but this felt different. This felt personal. "I'm not questioning your authority. I'm just saying that I'd like to review the specific sections you're referring to. Could you give me the exact rule numbers?" "I don't need to justify myself to you," Linda shot back. "These violations need to be corrected within 48 hours, or I'll be forced to take further action." "What kind of further action?" Maya asked, genuine concern creeping into her voice. Linda smiled coldly. "The HOA has the power to impose fines, and in extreme cases of non-compliance, we can even initiate proceedings to force problematic residents to sell their homes." Maya felt as though she had been punched in the stomach. This house represented everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made. The thought of losing it over a garden gnome and slightly crooked parking seemed insane. "Mrs. Patterson, I've been living here for 3 years without any problems. I pay my HOA dues on time, I keep my property clean, and I follow all the rules. I think we can work this out reasonably." But Linda was already walking away. 48 hours, she called over her shoulder. "And next time, maybe you should consider finding a neighborhood that's more suitable for your situation." Maya stood in her driveway, watching Linda disappear into her own house across the street. The meaning behind that last comment was unmistakable, and it hit Maya like a physical blow. She had hoped that in 2023, in this progressive city, she wouldn't have to deal with this kind of prejudice. But here it was, disguised as HOA enforcement. She looked up at her house, at the windows glowing warmly in the evening light, at the small garden she had carefully tended, at the mailbox that bore her name in neat black letters. This was her home, the place where she had hosted her sister's birthday party, where she had cried over breakups and celebrated promotions, where she planned to build a life. Maya pulled out her phone and took pictures of everything Linda had mentioned: the garden gnome, her car's position in the driveway, the mailbox, Even the back porch where she had indeed hung some towels to dry earlier that week. She would need documentation if this escalated. As she finally walked to her front door, keys in hand, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't be intimidated, and she certainly wouldn't be pushed out of her own home by someone who thought she didn't belong. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. Tomorrow, she would start making some phone calls. The next morning, Maya woke up with a knot in her stomach that hadn't been there in months. She had barely slept, replaying the confrontation with Linda Patterson over and over in her mind. During her nursing shifts, Maya dealt with life and death situations daily, but somehow this threat to her home felt even more overwhelming. She called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She needed this day to figure out what was happening and protect herself. Maya made coffee and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, determined to research everything she could about HOA rules and her rights as a homeowner. First, she pulled out her copy of the Willowbrook Heights HOA handbook and began searching for the violations Linda had mentioned. After reading through Section 4.2 about decorative items 3 times, she confirmed what she had suspected. There was nothing prohibiting small garden decorations under 12 inches in height. The rule specifically mentioned large statues, fountains, and elaborate displays. The parking regulations were equally vague, requiring only that vehicles be parked in designated areas in a reasonable manner. Maya's driveway was clearly a designated area, and even if her parking wasn't perfectly straight, it was certainly reasonable. As for the mailbox, the guidelines stated that mailboxes should be well maintained, but hers was barely 3 years old and showed only minor weathering that was normal for the climate. The laundry rule was the only legitimate concern. There was indeed a clause about not hanging laundry visible from the street, though Maya had only hung towels on her back porch, which was barely visible from the road. Feeling more confident about her position, Maya decided to call the HOA management company directly. After being transferred twice, she finally reached Jennifer Martinez, the actual HOA administrator. Ms. Martinez, I received some violation notices yesterday from Linda Patterson, but I'm confused about several of the items, Maya explained. There was a long pause on the other end. I'm sorry, did you say Linda Patterson issued violation notices? Can you hold for just one moment? Maya heard typing in the background. Then Jennifer came back on the line, her voice more serious. Ms. Johnson, I need to clarify something important. Linda Patterson is not a compliance officer for our HOA. She's a resident who has volunteered to help with community events, but she has no authority to issue violation notices or threaten any kind of enforcement action. Maya felt her heart rate quicken. What do you mean she's not a compliance officer? She told me she's been enforcing HOA rules for 8 years. She's been complaining about various neighbors for 8 years, Jennifer replied with a sigh. But she has never held any official position with enforcement authority. Only I can issue official violation notices, and they must be sent in writing through the mail or email, not delivered verbally. So the violations she told me about are completely unofficial and have no standing whatsoever. Ms. Johnson, has Mrs. Patterson been harassing you? Because we've had complaints about her before. Maya felt a mixture of relief and anger washing over her. She threatened that I could be forced to sell my home if I didn't comply with her demands within 48 hours. Jennifer's voice became stern. That is completely false and constitutes harassment. Mrs. Patterson has no authority to make such threats. I'm going to need to document this conversation and send Mrs. Patterson a formal cease and desist letter. After hanging up with Jennifer, Maya felt vindicated but also more concerned. If Linda Patterson was willing to lie about her authority and make false threats, what else might she do? Maya decided to reach out to her neighbors to see if anyone else had experienced similar harassment. She started with Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived 2 houses down and had always been friendly. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Chen said when Maya described the situation. Linda has been a problem for years. She told my son that his motorcycle was too loud and threatened to have it towed even though it's completely legal and he only rides it on weekends. Did she claim to be from the HOA when she talked to your son? Yes. She said she was the compliance officer. My son actually called the management company too, and they told him the same thing they told you. She has no authority at all. Maya thanked Mrs. Chen and continued her informal investigation. By the end of the afternoon, she had spoken to 6 neighbors. and 4 of them had stories about Linda's unauthorized enforcement activities. The pattern was becoming clear. Linda targeted anyone she felt didn't belong in her neighborhood. The Martinez family had been told their children's bikes couldn't be left in their own driveway. The Johnsons, no relation to Maya, had been threatened over their holiday decorations. The new couple from India had been harassed about cooking smells, even though there were no HOA rules about cooking. But Maya noticed something troubling in these conversations. Most of her neighbors just complied with Linda's demands rather than fight them, even when they suspected she might be overstepping her authority. They found it easier to give in than to deal with the conflict. That evening, Maya sat on her front porch looking out at the neighborhood she had worked so hard to be part of. The houses were beautiful, the streets were quiet, and most of the actual neighbors were kind people. But Linda Patterson's shadow loomed over everything, creating an atmosphere of fear and division. Maya's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her sister, Carmen. "How's the new house treating you?" Carmen asked cheerfully. Maya found herself telling Carmen the whole story about Linda Patterson. Her sister listened quietly until Maya finished. "Maya, you know you can't let this woman push you around, right? You've worked too hard to get where you are." "I know, but what if she escalates things? What if she makes life so miserable that I end up wanting to leave anyway?" "Then she wins," Carmen said firmly. "And the next black family that tries to move into that neighborhood gets the same treatment. Sometimes you have to stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." Maya knew her sister was right. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about whether someone like Linda Patterson could use intimidation and lies to control who belonged in the neighborhood. As night fell, Maya made another decision. Tomorrow, she would not only stand her ground, she would find out exactly who Linda Patterson really was and what gave her the audacity to think she could decide who belonged in Willowbrook Heights. Maya returned to work the next day feeling more determined than ever. During her lunch break, she called her cousin Marcus, who worked as a paralegal and had helped her with the house purchase 3 years ago. "Marcus, I need your help with something." She explained the situation with Linda Patterson. "This woman is committing fraud by impersonating an HOA official," Marcus said immediately. "And if she's targeting you because of race, that's housing discrimination, which is a federal crime. Maya, you need to document everything." "I've been taking pictures and writing down our conversations." "Good. Keep doing that. But also I think you should find out more about this Linda Patterson. Something doesn't add up about someone who acts this entitled without any real authority." That afternoon, Maya decided to do some research about Linda Patterson herself. She started with a simple Google search and found Linda's Facebook profile, which was mostly public. What she discovered was interesting. Linda constantly posted complaints about neighbors, tagged the city council in posts about property values, and shared articles about maintaining neighborhood character. But the most revealing post was from 6 months ago. "Another house in our neighborhood just sold to investors. We need to be vigilant about keeping our community standards high. Some people just don't understand what it takes to maintain property values." The post had dozens of comments, and Maya read through them with growing anger. The coded language was clear to anyone who knew how to read it. Community standards and neighborhood character were euphemisms for keeping certain types of people out. Maya was so absorbed in her research that she didn't notice Linda Patterson marching across the street toward her house until she heard aggressive knocking on her front door. Maya opened the door to find Linda standing there with a man she didn't recognize. He was middle-aged, wearing a cheap suit and holding a clipboard. "Ms. Johnson," Linda announced triumphantly, "this is Robert Kim from the city's Code Enforcement Department. I've filed a formal complaint about multiple violations at your property." Maya looked at Robert Kim, who appeared uncomfortable with the situation. "Mr. Kim, what exactly are you here to investigate?" Robert cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I received a complaint about potential code violations. I need to do a visual inspection of your property to determine if there are any issues that need to be addressed." "Of course," Maya said, stepping aside. "You're welcome to look around." Linda pushed past Maya into the house. "I'll need to document everything for my report." "Actually, Mrs. Patterson," Robert said firmly, City inspections don't require resident participation. I need you to wait outside, please. Linda's face turned red. I'm the one who filed the complaint. I have every right to be present. No, ma'am, you don't, Robert replied. Please wait on the sidewalk. After Linda reluctantly left, Robert turned to Maya with an apologetic expression. Ma'am, I have to be honest with you. This is the third complaint Mrs. Patterson has filed about your property in the past 6 months. Each time, I've found no violations. Maya's eyes widened. She's been filing complaints about me for 6 months? But she just confronted me for the first time 2 days ago. Robert nodded grimly. She's been calling the city regularly about various properties in this neighborhood, but yours and the Martinez family's house seem to be her particular focus. The Martinez family? Yes, they're the Latino family 3 streets over. Mrs. Patterson has filed noise complaints, parking complaints, and landscaping complaints about them too, none of which had any merit. Maya felt sick to her stomach. Linda's harassment campaign was much more extensive than she had realized, and it was clearly targeted at the few minority families in the neighborhood. Robert conducted his inspection quickly and thoroughly. Maya's house was in excellent condition, far better than many properties he had to inspect. Her yard was well maintained, her home was properly kept up, and there were absolutely no code violations. Ms. Johnson, your property is in perfect compliance with all city codes, Robert announced as they walked back to the front door. I'm going to note in my report that this is the 3rd unfounded complaint, and I'm recommending that any future complaints from Mrs. Patterson about your property be subject to additional scrutiny. Linda was waiting impatiently on the sidewalk, tapping her foot and checking her watch dramatically. Well, she demanded as Robert approached her. No violations found, Robert said curtly. Mrs. Patterson, I need to speak with you privately. Maya watched from her doorway as Robert had what appeared to be a heated conversation with Linda on the sidewalk. Although she couldn't hear the exact words, Linda's body language made it clear that she was not happy with what Robert was telling her. Finally, Linda stomped back across the street to her own house while Robert walked over to Maya. Ms. Johnson, I advised Mrs. Patterson that filing false complaints is a misuse of city resources and could result in penalties for her. I also told her that harassment of neighbors can result in legal consequences. Thank you, Mr. Kim. I really appreciate your professionalism. Ma'am, if Mrs. Patterson continues to harass you, I'd recommend you contact the police and consider getting a restraining order. What she's doing isn't just annoying, it's potentially illegal. After Robert left, Maya sat on her couch feeling overwhelmed. Linda Patterson wasn't just a busybody neighbor. She was conducting a systematic campaign of harassment against minority families in the neighborhood, and Maya was clearly her primary target. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Some people need to learn their place. You won't be happy here. Maya's hand shook as she screenshotted the message. Linda was escalating, and Maya realized that this situation was far from over. In fact, it was probably just beginning. She called Marcus again. I think I need more than just documentation. Linda Patterson is getting dangerous. Maya, I'm going to connect you with someone. My friend Sarah Chen is a civil rights lawyer who specializes in housing discrimination. Can you meet with her tomorrow? Yes, absolutely. As Maya hung up the phone, she looked out her front window at Linda Patterson's house across the street. Linda was standing at her window, staring directly at Maya's house. When their eyes met through the glass, Linda didn't look away. Instead, she smiled coldly and drew the curtains shut. Maya realized that Linda Patterson had just declared war. But what Linda didn't know was that Maya Johnson had never backed down from a fight in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. Maya met with Sarah Chen, the civil rights lawyer, at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. Sarah was a petite woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened intently as Maya described everything that had happened with Linda Patterson. Maya, what you're describing is textbook housing discrimination, Sarah said, pulling out a legal pad. The pattern of behavior, the targeting of minority families, the use of false authority, it's all actionable under federal fair housing laws. But can we prove it's about race? Linda never explicitly said anything racist. Sarah smiled grimly. Honey, they never do anymore. But discrimination cases are built on patterns of behavior, not just explicit statements. The fact that she's only targeting minority families while ignoring similar or worse issues with white neighbors is evidence enough. Maya felt a glimmer of hope. So what can we do? First, we document everything and file a complaint with HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Second, we can pursue a civil lawsuit for damages and an injunction to stop her harassment. Third, if she's impersonating an HOA official, that might be criminal fraud. How long does this take? Months, maybe longer. But Maya, I need you to understand something important. Fighting this case could get expensive and time-consuming. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought about the threatening text message, about Linda's campaign against other minority families, about the fear in Mrs. Martinez's voice when she'd spoken about Linda's complaints. Yes, I'm prepared. This isn't just about me anymore. That afternoon, Maya was working in her front garden when she noticed Linda Patterson walking across the street again. This time, she had another woman with her, someone Maya had seen at HOA meetings but never spoken to. "Ms. Johnson," Linda called out in a fake sweet voice, "I'd like you to meet Patricia Wells. She's the actual vice president of the HOA board." Maya stood up, wiping dirt from her gardening gloves. Patricia Wells was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a nervous expression. "Hello, Ms. Johnson," Patricia said hesitantly. "Linda asked me to speak with you about some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" Maya asked politely. Linda stepped forward eagerly. "Patricia, show her the complaints we've received." Patricia looked uncomfortable. "Well, we've had some neighbors express concerns about various things." "What specific things?" Maya pressed. Patricia glanced at Linda, then back at Maya. "Some people feel that certain residents aren't maintaining community standards." Maya felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice level. "Ms. Wells, can you be more specific? What exactly am I doing that violates community standards?" "Well," Patricia fumbled with some papers. "There have been complaints about your garden gnome, your parking, and..." "And what?" Maya interrupted. "I've already spoken with Jennifer Martinez at the management company. She confirmed that I'm not in violation of any HOA rules. She also confirmed that Mrs. Patterson has no authority to issue violation notices." Patricia's face went pale. "Jennifer said what?" Linda's confident expression suddenly looked less certain. "Patricia, we discussed this. Some residents are just more observant about rule violations than others." "Mrs. Patterson," Maya said firmly, "you told me you were a compliance officer. You threatened me with losing my home. You filed false complaints with the city. And now you're trying to manipulate a real HOA board member into supporting your harassment campaign." Patricia Wells took a step back from Linda. "Linda, did you tell Ms. Johnson you were a compliance officer?" I was speaking on behalf of concerned residents." "That's a lie," Maya said, pulling out her phone. "I have documentation of everything you've said and done. I also have copies of the 3 false complaints you filed with the city, and I have the threatening text message you sent me." Patricia looked at Linda with shock. "Linda, you sent threatening text messages?" "I never..." Linda started, but Maya was already showing Patricia the screenshot of the message. Patricia read the message, her expression growing more horrified by the second. "Linda, this is completely unacceptable. The HOA board cannot and will not tolerate harassment of residents. But Patricia, you know what's been happening to our neighborhood. Property values, community character..." "Stop," Patricia said firmly. "Linda, I think you need to leave Miss Johnson alone. This conversation is over." Linda stood there for a moment, clearly not expecting to lose her ally. "Fine. But don't come crying to me when this neighborhood goes downhill." As Linda stormed off, Patricia turned to Maya with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Johnson, I am so sorry. I had no idea Linda was misrepresenting herself or harassing residents. This is not what our HOA is about. Thank you for listening, Ms. Wells. Please call me Patricia, and please know that you have the full support of the actual HOA board. Linda Patterson does not speak for us, and her behavior is completely unacceptable." After Patricia left, Maya felt cautiously optimistic. But her optimism was short-lived. That evening, she discovered that someone had trampled her flower garden and spray-painted "Move" on her mailbox. Maya immediately called the police. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 30 minutes and took a report. He photographed the damage and asked Maya about any ongoing disputes with neighbors. "Ms. Johnson, do you have any reason to suspect who might have done this?" Maya explained the situation with Linda Patterson. Officer Rodriguez listened carefully and took notes. "Ma'am, this appears to be criminal mischief, possibly motivated by bias. We'll investigate, but I have to tell you, these cases can be hard to prove without witnesses or video evidence." "I understand. However, if you're being harassed, you might want to consider getting security cameras and documenting everything. If this escalates, you may need a restraining order." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the word "move" painted on her mailbox. The message was clear: someone wanted her gone, and they were willing to commit crimes to make it happen. She called Sarah Chen first thing in the morning. "Maya, this changes everything," Sarah said when she heard about the vandalism. "This is now criminal harassment, possibly a hate crime. We need to accelerate our legal strategy." "What does that mean?" "It means we're going to file for an emergency restraining order against Linda Patterson. And we're going to make it very clear that any further harassment will result in serious legal consequences." Maya felt scared, but determined. She had worked too hard for too long to let someone like Linda Patterson drive her from her home. But she was also realizing that this fight was going to be bigger and more difficult than she had ever imagined. What Maya didn't know was that Linda Patterson was about to make a mistake that would change everything. And that mistake would reveal a truth that neither Maya nor Linda could have anticipated. 2 weeks after the vandalism incident, Maya was installing security cameras around her property when her phone rang. It was Jennifer Martinez from the HOA management company, and she sounded excited. "Miss Johnson, I need to see you immediately. Can you come to my office today?" "Is everything okay? Has Linda Patterson done something else?" "Just please come in. I have something very important to show you." Maya drove to the management company's office, her mind racing with possibilities. Jennifer met her at the front desk with a thick folder in her hands and an expression Maya couldn't quite read. "Maya, I've been doing some research into Linda Patterson's background, particularly her history with this HOA and her claims about enforcing rules for 8 years." They sat down in Jennifer's office, and Jennifer opened the folder. "What I discovered is going to shock you. Linda Patterson has never been a homeowner in Willowbrook Heights." Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she doesn't own the house she's been living in. She's never owned it. She's been renting that property from the actual owner for the past 5 years. Maya felt like the ground had shifted beneath her. "She's a renter? But she acts like she owns the whole neighborhood." Jennifer nodded grimly. "It gets worse. The house she's renting? She's been behind on rent for months. The actual owner, a man named David Patterson, no relation despite the name, has been trying to evict her." "How do you know all this?" "Because David Patterson called me last week. He wanted to know if Linda had any official role with the HOA, because she'd been telling people she was authorized to speak on behalf of the Homeowners Association. When he found out she was lying, he was furious." Maya stared at the documents Jennifer was showing her. "So Linda Patterson has been harassing actual homeowners while she's not even supposed to be living in the neighborhood anymore?" "That's exactly right. And Maya, there's more." Jennifer pulled out another set of papers. "I did some digging into her rental history. She's been evicted from 3 different neighborhoods in the past 10 years, and in each case there were complaints about her harassing other tenants and neighbors." Maya felt a mixture of vindication and disbelief. "She's been doing this for years?" "It appears so. She has a pattern of moving into neighborhoods, pretending to be an authority figure, harassing residents she doesn't approve of, and then getting kicked out when her behavior becomes too problematic." Jennifer handed Maya a business card. "David Patterson wants to meet with you. He's appalled by what Linda has been doing, and he wants to help you with your legal case against her." That afternoon, Maya met David Patterson at a coffee shop downtown. He was a soft-spoken man in his 70s who seemed genuinely distressed about Linda's behavior. "Ms. Johnson, I am so sorry for what my tenant has put you through," he began. "I had no idea she was impersonating HOA officials or harassing neighbors. How long has this been going on?" David sighed deeply. "I started getting complaints about Linda about 2 years ago, but they were vague. Neighbors saying she was difficult or pushy. I thought it was just personality conflicts. It wasn't until recently that I learned the extent of her behavior." "Why haven't you evicted her before now?" "I've been trying. Linda knows tenant rights laws very well, and she's been fighting the eviction process at every step. But after learning about her harassment campaign, I've escalated my efforts. She'll be out within 30 days. Maya felt a strange mix of emotions. She was relieved that Linda would be leaving, but also frustrated that it had taken so long for the truth to come out. Mr. Patterson, did Linda ever own property in this neighborhood? Never. She's never owned property anywhere, as far as I can tell. She seems to prefer renting because it makes it easier for her to move on when her behavior becomes too problematic. That evening, Maya called Sarah Chen with the news. Maya, this is incredible, Sarah said. A tenant harassing actual homeowners while claiming HOA authority? This strengthens our case enormously. How so? Because it shows a clear pattern of fraudulent behavior. Linda Patterson has been systematically deceiving people about her status and authority. This isn't just harassment, it's fraud, impersonation, and conspiracy. Maya felt hopeful for the first time in weeks, but her optimism was interrupted by a knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw Linda Patterson standing on her porch, but something was different. Linda looked disheveled, desperate, and angry in a way Maya had never seen before. Maya opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "What do you want, Linda?" "You did this," Linda hissed through the crack in the door. "You've been investigating me, turning people against me. I defended myself against your harassment. That's all. I've been protecting this neighborhood for years. Do you have any idea what happens when people like you move in? Property values drop, crime goes up, the whole character of the community changes." Maya felt her anger rising. "People like me? You mean nurses who pay their mortgages on time and take care of their property?" "You know what I mean," Linda snapped. "This used to be a good neighborhood. Linda, you're being evicted. You have no authority here. You never did. You're nothing but a renter who's behind on her payments." Linda's face went white, then red. "How do you know about my rent?" "Because your landlord told me. Because everyone knows the truth about you now." Linda pressed her face closer to the door crack. "This isn't over. Just because I'm leaving doesn't mean you belong here." "Actually, it does," Maya said firmly. "Because unlike you, I actually own my home." "This is my neighborhood now, not yours." Linda's expression crumbled. For the first time since Maya had met her, Linda Patterson looked like what she really was. A powerless person who had been using lies and intimidation to feel important. "You people always win," Linda muttered. "You people who work hard and buy houses? Yes, we do tend to win." Maya closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. The confrontation was finally over. But she realized that the real victory wasn't Linda leaving. The real victory was discovering that she had more power and support than she'd ever imagined. 3 months later, Maya stood in her beautifully maintained front yard, watching a moving truck pull away from Linda Patterson's former house. The woman who had terrorized her and other minority families for years was finally gone, evicted not just for unpaid rent, but for the criminal charges that had been filed against her. The legal process had moved faster than anyone expected. Once other victims came forward, including the Martinez family, Mrs. Chen's son, and 2 other families Linda had harassed. The district attorney had filed charges for harassment, criminal impersonation, filing false reports, and vandalism. Linda had pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, accepting a year of probation, community service, and a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting any of her victims. She was also required to pay restitution for the damage to Maya's property and legal fees. But perhaps more importantly, the case had brought the Willowbrook Heights community together in unexpected ways. Patricia Wells, the real HOA vice president, had apologized publicly at a community meeting and announced new policies to prevent future harassment by residents who claimed false authority. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Maya, could you come over? The new family moving into Linda's house wants to meet you." Maya walked across the street to where Mrs. Chen was standing with a young black couple and their 2 small children. The woman looked to be about Maya's age, while the man was carrying a toddler who was giggling and reaching for everything around him. "Maya, I'd like you to meet the Williams family," Mrs. Chen said warmly. "They're renting David Patterson's house while they look for a place to buy in the neighborhood." "Hi, I'm Maya Johnson," Maya said, extending her hand to the woman. "I'm Keisha Williams, and this is my husband Jerome and our kids Aiden and Zoe." Keisha replied with a warm smile. "Mrs. Chen was just telling us about everything that happened with the previous tenant. We wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Jerome nodded. "Mrs. Chen explained how you stood up to that woman's harassment. If you hadn't fought back, families like ours might never have felt safe moving here." Maya felt a warmth spreading through her chest. You don't need to thank me. I was just protecting my home. You were doing more than that, Keisha said. You were protecting the idea that families like ours belong in neighborhoods like this. Little Aiden squirmed in Jerome's arms, reaching toward Maya's house. Pretty, he announced, pointing at her flower garden. Maya laughed. Would you like to see the flowers up close? As they walked toward Maya's garden, Keisha fell into step beside her. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Were you scared when all this was happening? Maya considered the question carefully. Terrified, she admitted. Not just of losing my house, but of the idea that someone could make me feel like I didn't belong somewhere I'd worked so hard to be. How did you find the courage to fight back? Maya looked around the neighborhood, at Mrs. Chen waving from her garden, at the Martinez children playing in their yard 3 streets over, at the beautiful homes where families of all backgrounds were building their lives. I realized that it wasn't just about me, Maya said. It was about every family that would come after me. Every person who deserved to feel safe in their own home. They reached Maya's front garden, where her controversial garden gnome still sat proudly among the flowers. Aiden clapped his hands with delight when he saw it. That's the famous garden gnome that started everything? Jerome asked with a grin. The very one. He's become quite the celebrity in the neighborhood. As the Williams family explored Maya's garden, Maya noticed several neighbors coming out of their houses to introduce themselves. The community that Linda Patterson had tried to divide with fear and suspicion was now actively welcoming new residents. Patricia Wells approached the group, carrying a plate of homemade cookies. I wanted to welcome the Williams family properly, she announced. And Maya, I have some news for you. What kind of news? The HOA board met last night, and we voted unanimously to name you our new community outreach coordinator. The position comes with a small stipend, and your job would be to help new residents feel welcome and ensure that everyone understands their rights and the actual HOA rules. Maya was speechless for a moment. You want me to be the person who helps families when they move into the neighborhood? Exactly. After everything you've been through and the way you handled yourself, we can't think of anyone better qualified. Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, the Williams family with their excited children, Mrs. Chen beaming with pride, Patricia Wells holding out an official-looking document, and other neighbors gathering to see what was happening. I would be honored, Maya said. As the afternoon turned to evening, the impromptu welcome gathering for the Williams family grew into a full neighborhood barbecue. Maya found herself at the center of it all, introducing neighbors to each other, sharing stories, and helping everyone feel included. Jerome Williams found Maya by the grill where she was helping flip burgers. Maya, can I tell you something? Sure. When we were looking at houses to rent, the real estate agent warned us about this neighborhood. She said there had been some tension and that minority families might not feel comfortable here. Maya felt a familiar anger rising. Really? But then she told us about you, about how you fought back against harassment and won. She said that if we moved here, we'd be moving into Maya Johnson's neighborhood, and that meant we'd be safe. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. Jerome, this isn't my neighborhood. It's our neighborhood. All of ours. I know, he said with a smile, but it's your neighborhood too, and that makes all the difference. As the sun set over Willowbrook Heights, Maya stood on her front porch, looking out at neighbors from different backgrounds sharing food and laughter in her front yard. Children of various ethnicities were playing together on her lawn, while their parents discussed everything from work to weekend plans. The garden gnome that had supposedly started the whole conflict sat peacefully among Maya's flowers, no longer a symbol of division but a reminder of how far they'd all come. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Carmen. How's the house treating you now? Maya smiled as she typed back, like I belong here. Finally. 3 years after buying her first home, Maya Johnson had discovered something more valuable than property ownership. She had learned that home isn't just a place you buy. It's a community you help create, defend, and nurture. And in defending her right to belong, she had created space for others to belong too. The threatening message Linda Patterson had sent months ago, some people need to learn their place, had been right in a way Linda never intended. Maya had learned her place. Her place was standing up for what was right, protecting her community, and making sure that everyone who worked hard and treated others with respect could find their place too. As Maya turned off her porch light and headed inside her home, she passed the small mirror in her hallway and caught her own reflection. The woman looking back at her was the same nurse who had worked double shifts to afford this house, but she was also something more now. She was a neighbor, a community leader, and a guardian of the principle that belonging isn't something you're granted by others. It's something you claim for yourself, and then help others claim too. Maya Johnson was home.